Distinguished colleagues, we still have some time left, some time for discussion. Now we have listened to a number of presentations. Does any one of you have any questions? I believe, yes, let's start with you. As long as I'm mostly working with space, what is the market situation now? Who understands that? Is there a role for space to play, or still 80% of the market is occupied by aerial photography? Tomorrow, what do you mean tomorrow? It's already now. We're talking about the ratio. What, nobody's interested? Then we can do it tomorrow, yes. I can share my subjective view on that. Naturally, I don't know of any plans of decision makers, but I suspect why aerial photography is still winning hands down over space. Because of the resolution, first of all. Small size for large-scale photography. I believe that so far space has a lot of there is too much distance between them, and space has to catch up with them. And all this 1 meter resolution, or something like that, this is good only for monitoring. But mapping, for 1 to 5,000, you can do this with space imagery, but anything better, no, unlikely. But our country is uncovered, like we are having problems with the small hydrotechnical facilities. I spoke to Krasnoyarsk. In their situation center, they monitor only one hydropower plant, and all others, there are thousands of them, minor ones there, which are not controlled. But we could have easily found them from space, but it is not done. In that regard, other countries might be doing this, but we need to do something about it. I will allow myself to comment on this. In fact, I won't remember the exact numbers, but this year small-scale mapping operations are similar to aerial photography in terms of the overall area. And this year, space covers about 90% of Russia. 90% of Russia? What Russia? What's the resolution? Where is that? The collected products are covered by space mostly. Whatever available resolutions we have, 1 meter and 2.5 meters. No, you talk about 90% of Russia, or 90% of all the projects done this year. But how many kilometers? Do you know this? I cannot remember the exact number. But if we're talking about aerial photography, it's about 500,000 images. 500,000 square kilometers. I'd say it's about the same as aerial photography, same 500,000. I also
have a comment to make regarding space imaging. I have good news for space, in particular the statement of work for 2020 under Far East mapping program stipulates space images no worse than 140 centimeters, approved by Rosregister. Sorry, our panel is called Aerial Survey. Tomorrow we will speak about satellite imaging for remote sensing. On Wednesday we will have a roundtable on the role of satellite remote sensing. And one of the subjects is aerial survey versus satellite. I mean, if we switch subjects like that, we will strike others as unprofessional. Okay, let's go back to the original topic of this session, which is aerial survey. And as a moderator, or do we have a question? Actually, my question relates to both imaging systems. this year Rosvestor commissioned a scientific project with the following topic: assessing national economy's needs in remote sensing data. So based on the outcomes of this project, I think Fyodor Shkurov will have more about this. So we will know what materials we require and what modes we are going to engage to deliver that, and we'll be better positioned to make optimized orders. We still have about 7 minutes, so let's make the best of the available time of this session. You know, I've been listening to all these systems. I know we are talking about high resolution, hundreds of millions of pixels, but how come we haven't heard about airborne SARs, radars? I mean, they are not very accurate, but in the context of high cloud cover, radars could do the trick, and then we would not have raised this topic. Or is the market really down for radars? Well, it's just that based on the radar imaging, we can get images about relief, vegetation, or some shift maps, displacement maps. Roscartography is not charged with this task. What we are charged with is have a color correct maps, and radar is not on our radar. Still have time? Yuri, have a question for you. You're sitting there, very shy. I think you should be the target of most of the questions. First thing I want to ask you, you presented a two-lens or dual-lens camera. Obviously, there will be a synthesized image at the end with its intrinsic distortions. Have you examined the precision of synthesis? I mean, 1 out of 2. You said you have a distortion rate of 0.5 for both lenses. Maybe you will lose a pixel somewhere in the middle. Maybe so. In fact, the stitching algorithm is not our own invention. It is a specialized Austrian company which did it for Vexal. It did the same for us. We have not explored it in particular. We looked into precision of stereoscopic measurements, as it is important for photogrammetry, and the accuracy received was pretty high. I mean, we took a couple of stereo pairs, measured GCPs based on stereo pairs, and the accuracy of stereoscopic measurements was pretty good. I haven't noticed any problems at this stitching line, nothing like that, nothing of the sort. I have not detected any issues whatsoever, but I didn't go deep into that. I think what we do day to day is enough. No need to dive into theory of it all. I mean, we have the Science Academy for that. And one other question, if I may. You said that the 300mm focus camera gives 4 km GSD. What about the altitude or the height? I mean, this is the Z coordinate, right? I'm not talking about accuracy, I'm talking about resolution. accuracy has not been on our, is still on our to-do list, but you will use it for monitoring purposes. We're planning to use it for city surveys as well. It's in our plans. All right then. Did you check the focus to base ratio? It will not work for mapping, but for orthophoto it is fine. That's right, but you also need to have a special camera for relief. Like in Soviet days, we also always had two cameras. Today there are revolving cameras, right? What is better, rotating camera? Yes, we have an Israeli company that purchases phase ones and turns them into 1:3 rotating type. I wanted to ask about that blur or shift. So, what kind of blur does it result in? I mean, given the speeds, I'm not talking about Beechcrafts that fly at 540 kilometers per hour. We're talking about 230 kilometers per hour, and the blur with the 164,000 exposure, which is a normal exposure rate, the blur will be less than 1 pixel. I mean, that table is well verified, it's not empirical data, it's a property that can be calculated using a special formula. I mean, there are several factors that play into the aircraft speed, the weather conditions, and the exposure rate, and then you can have your blur information. My question is for Irina. Considering your plans to make meteorological support mandatory for all users, and since there is a great quantity of aerial photographers, I mean, how exactly are you planning to check on compliance with this new regulation across our large country, to make sure you're in line with this regulation in terms of signal to noise ratio? We designed a system of criteria. We're talking about artistic quality. With geometry, it's more or less clear. There are some checkpoints that you measure against, and if there is divergence, then you can make corrections. For artistic quality, you need to rely on a set of criteria, and those criteria have already been developed. These are criteria determined on the basis of a special algorithm, and we are in the process of developing software so that it's not code-shaped, but presented as a software. We're talking about 6 criteria, all measurable, all quantifiable, most of them normalized, and then based on the performance, we can make conclusions about the quality, overall quality. For example, we have the blur value, signal to noise, resolution, and histogram analysis. So all these parameters are well rated metrically. So it's a software I think that this
расширение числа пользователей будет распространяться бесплатно.
I think the software will be delivered on a free of charge basis just to increase the number of users. Alexei Smirnov, question for Irina as well. You showed a table with sensors. I specialize in drones, so 99.9% of developers don't use phase one. This is too expensive to own, so typically we use household cameras, consumer cameras, and the one that we use is one of the best, but it's very noisy. Don't you think that once those regulations are in place, those cameras will be left on the sidelines? Of course there will be noise on the image. It will not go away. And with a certain degree of regulation, we will look at the average indicators, and that will apply to consumer cameras, wide-angle cameras, so we will set the standards based on the capabilities of imaging surveys. I think we should sum up. Let's thank our panelists one more time. And with this, I declare a coffee break.